Well, Cody, thank you for your kindness and your kind words. You guys have been amazing. And also welcome to everyone who is a part of this call this morning. And I pray, or actually this afternoon, after morning, I pray that this is going to be beneficial to everybody that's listening. This is also going to be a part of my life story and my own journey concerning mental health and other things that we've been able to accomplish within the ministry of the Abundant Life Christian Church. But I want you guys to know one thing, if nothing else. One, God is concerned about your mental health. God is concerned about your mental health. And what we want to do in this ministry is, like Cody said, we want to bridge the gap between faith environments and the clinical environments where necessary, so that people can truly understand that we have a bridge that we can use to actually help people and meet the felt needs of every part of the individual. I'm not going to preach, even though I really feel like I'm going to. I really feel like I want to. But what I am going to share is that we believe that we are made up of three parts. We believe that we are flesh, meaning the body that we live in. We are soul, which is the seat of our emotions, our intellect, our personality. And then we also are spirit. Many people don't believe in the third part or may have different understandings of what that truly means. But that's a part of the paradigm that I'm going to share from. And so I want to share that with you up front. So the soul is what we want to talk about. The soul is the emotions and all of your experiences and everything that it takes to make you who you are. So I'm going to share some slides here and make sure that I keep myself in order. So forgive me as I switch over here. But ultimately, I want you to know that why churches is really something that started for me back about 20 plus years ago when I was working for the Department of State Health Services. I worked there for 26 years. And a part of my time working there, I worked in mental health and substance abuse, and also worked in conjunction with the folks that were dealing with the Austin State Hospital and all of the state hospitals around the state of Texas. But during that time, I was housed at the Austin State Hospital campus. Therefore, I got to work with people that were directly providing care for those that were accessing their services. During that time, though, one of the things that really bothered me was that those were mostly folks that were indigent or very low income, and the state hospital system was kind of their last resort. And so what I found is that during that time, I said, it really built a burden and a passion for me to say, okay, for those who are dealing with life and life is dealing with them in this way, how could I personally have an impact on their lives? And so that's really the impetus that began my journey to determine what is it that I, as an individual, and then we collectively as a body of Christ can actually do to make an impact in this environment. So let me go to, didn't work. Hold on. There we go. Okay, gotcha. So let me give you a little bit of background about who I am. And this is not all of who I am, but gives you a little bit of understanding. First of all, I'm going to start with things that aren't on this list. I've been married now for coming up on 29 years in May. My wife is named Jackie Todd. She actually works at Texas State today. And we have been happily married for most of those years. I won't go any deeper than that. No, I'm joking. But no, my wife is one of the most amazing people that you'll ever want to meet. And so if you have the opportunity to meet her, you should. In addition to that, we have 6 children that adopted us. We weren't fortunate enough to have our own kids, but we did have 6 kids that we have helped to raise and been a major part of their life, and they have changed ours. Make one point of clarification. I did attend Southwest Texas State, but that is not my place of graduation. But that is the place that actually you'll hear in my story here in a few minutes that actually played the biggest role in helping me to become who I am today. While I worked in IT for 30 years for the state of Texas, most people would say, well, gee whiz, sir, you worked in IT. You didn't work in the areas of responsibility. My role and responsibility in IT went from being up under a desk to fix people's computers to being a senior IT director. And my responsibilities led me to be directly connected with those who were providing care and doing work in those areas of responsibility. So I worked in prevention and preparedness. I worked in HIV and STD. I worked in cancer control. I worked in family and community health. I worked in many more places than I was able to put on this one slide. But in all of those roles, I was working directly with those who were either administrating at the state level or directly working with those that were providing care. Then at the end of my career, I moved away from DSHS and I worked for the comptroller's office. And I learned that there's actually a whole process of pulling money so that the money can be provided to the individuals who are actually taking care of folks. And so where that taught me is that not only do we have to deal with the care, but we also have to deal with the financial side of the burden that people are feeling. And so that was amazing. But now having 4 years under my belt, nearly 5 years being senior pastor and having retired from the state environment, I still have an impact in the community outside of the church, dealing with the Rural and Community Health Fund, which is provided by the Greater Fayette County Foundation and funded by the St. David's Foundation. I also am the chaplain for the Hays County Commissioners Court, so I work with the commissioners and the county judge on occasion. I also work with the community organizations active in disaster, which is COAD. So we actually, in our facility as a church, we're actually a disaster response facility as well because of them and the American Red Cross and some other folks that we connect with. And then outside of that, I work with the Homeless Coalition, the Hays County Healthy Hays Coalition, quite a number of things. So I'm kind of got my hands in a lot of different places, but truly these are the only things that I work in are places of my passion. So what we're going to do today is, if I can get this working right. Okay, there we go. Nope, wrong way. I promise you, I was an IT professional. I know what I'm doing. Okay, let's look at the agenda. So what we're going to talk about briefly is we're going to talk about why churches. I think there's some real impact that churches can make in the felt experience of our people in the community. We're also going to do a couple of case studies to talk about why that's important and where we've been able to make an impact. Then I'm also going to talk about our program in a little bit of detail to give you an understanding of what we do and what I believe we've been led to accomplish in getting these things done. The questions, we're actually going to wait until the end, but I am going to give you my contact information if you desire to ever communicate with me and find out what else we do. So, but first I want you to know why churches. Specifically for the African American and brown and Black families in the United States, churches have been the foundation of what we have called our place of being home. Churches have provided lots of things for us, including, wow, this is more difficult than it should be. Our churches have provided a place where we have faith in God. Our experience a lot of times has caused us to say, okay, we don't have a voice in our destiny. We don't understand why we're being persecuted and going through the many things that we've experienced. But having faith in God has been a foundation for us and been something that we rely on. And regardless of your background, we still come back to that faith. We also have a strong sense of family through churches. And because our families come together, that was the place that our families were able to find community. So we were able to find a place that we could actually enjoy one another. And if we didn't have community other places, we couldn't get news. We didn't have fellowship. We didn't have food. We could come to the church and we could find a place of community and safety. Okay, another thing that we found is a place of healing and hope, because many times when we couldn't find hope in other places, we could come to the church and get a message of hope. We could get an understanding that we're not by ourselves and that we can actually succeed in the places that we are. And we leaned on each other. And when we fell, when we ran into issues and problems, we always had a place where we could go and get healed. So church was a place of healing. Church was also a place of education. When we weren't able to get educated, when it was illegal in many cases, we were able to come to the church and get educated. We were taught to read in churches. We were taught to recite. We were taught to remember and to memorize. And we were able to obtain education in ways that we weren't able. And even as we came up through the time and even to the times of this day, churches are still a place of education. And I pray that we can be a greater source of an educational resource in that we can provide a more diverse understanding of our foundation as it applies to our community. So in addition to that, we want to become a place of trust where in the past, many African Americans, Black and brown individuals were not able to trust the communities in which we lived. And so we found that in churches, we were able to trust one another and build upon our faith and also our community. So what I want you to know is that no matter what position and what the culture does in the world, even as we are in a postmodern age today, our churches have the ability to provide life. We have the ability to provide life and encouragement and all of these things that I mentioned. And it's done in such a way that I'll say is from our baby dedications to your internment. And for some of you, you might understand that that means from cradle to grave. We are a lifelong entity, which makes us even more greatly positioned to be able to deal with people's mental health, because many times we've known these individuals from the time they were born. And as they grow and matriculate through life, we then walk with them through life. So churches are important. The next thing I want you to know, and I gathered this from a conference that I went to last week from a wonderful licensed professional counselor named Jasmine Johnson. You can see her website on there, but she talked about indigenous practices. And I will tell you, as a pastor, I started to think, wow, indigenous practices, are we going to start talking about spirituality, or are we going to stay talking about the church? But then I started to understand what she meant. There's a great understanding that we have some gathering practices where we come together and we experience some excellent things like call and response worship. When we sing together and we worship together, it binds us together as a community. When we have an emotional expression, and I'm sitting down purposefully today because if I stood up, I would be using my hands a lot and you would think that I'm behind a pulpit. And so I said, no, let me sit down because I'm very emotional in the way that I communicate what I do. But that's just a part of who we are as a people. And therefore, our community actually provides us our therapy. Our community is our therapy, and we're able to relate to one another and help one another with our own lived experiences. I meant to say in the previous slide that we have a continuity of resilience through the church. We have a continuity of resilience through our communal therapy, and we help one another in lots of ways. In addition, we have healing prayers and laying on of hands. And sometimes we don't realize that our physical health and our emotional health are tied together. Therefore, when we have that connection of laying on of hands and hugging and welcoming people into the community and helping them to know that you belong, that's important. And I think that word I just used, belonging, is a big thing in our community today, that some people don't feel like they belong even in a church. I don't want to go too deep into that, but if you have experienced those types of issues where you feel like you're not accepted, I believe the church is willing to begin to move into a direction where we start to help people to understand that you can belong, even if you may be a little bit different. But we have to understand how we do that is important, and why we do it is equally important. Let's also talk about the fact that if you've been to a real lively church service like we often have, there's dancing, shouting, and sometimes even testimonials. We had a young man that talked about the fact that the doctors told him that his cancer had spread through all out of his body, and he believed that the cancer was going to kill him soon, and he came back with a PSA of 0. You better believe this weekend we shouted. And so those are the types of healing opportunities that we use with a very emotional and very vociferous, if I'll say, response. We also have hymns and spirituals. Those spirituals and those hymns for our ancestors many times were how we made it over. It helped, those songs helped us to understand that we could make it. And when we were going through depression, when we were going through oppression, when we were going through anxieties, those spirituals and those songs helped us to continue when we didn't have hope otherwise. And then don't let me talk about food. We like to sit and fellowship over food. I believe there's a reason they call it soul food because we pour our soul into that food and we season and put things in place and do things that will cause us to want to come back to the table. And that's something that's difficult for us sometimes because there are times that we lose fellowship with people and we could go to the place of healing, but we don't necessarily want to come back to the table. And so it's important that we understand that there's a blessing in coming back to the table. And then there's the anointing oil. This may be a foreign thing to many people, but when we have a certain type of healing process, we believe that there's power in the Spirit of God, and His ability to heal us is always present. And there are times that, as a representation of His healing properties, we may pour oil, olive oil specifically, that we've prayed over, that would be a deposit of the healing properties of God into your life. So, what I want you to know is that churches have the ability to change also how we perceive suffering, healing, and even how we support one another. So churches are important in that respect. Another thing that I want you to know is that a lot of times we're living behind barriers. African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, the Pacific Islanders, many times there are barriers to us receiving the type of access to care and also the types of rates of success concerning our care in the healthcare system. First of all, we know that there is a stigma in African American circles, especially, and also other cultures, a stigma towards mental health, where statistics will tell you that we're much less likely to seek that type of care. Because we've been told you just need to press through it. You just need to make it through it. You need to be strong. Or for the guys, you need to stand up for yourself. African Americans are 20% less likely to receive serious psychological help, and they're more likely to have that type of distress because of it. Also, there's generational trauma. Things that happened to our ancestors that now have affected us, and we may not even be privy to the situation and why we're experiencing abuse, why we're experiencing sexual abuse, why we're experiencing different types of poverty and things like that. And so there are generational trauma and historical oppression that we've all gone through. My wife went to a school in Arkansas, which was one of the first schools in that state to be integrated. She didn't know because she was not one of those that was bussed in, but her uncle was, and her grandfather was. And so, two of her uncles were. And so understanding that now, it was amazing that she was a salutatorian in her school, and she was able to meet the then governor, Bill Clinton. And so it's amazing that generational trauma did not continue in that way, but there are other areas where we've all experienced it. Also, we all understand the financial hardship. Many BIPOC individuals are dealing with not having the financial resources to be able to obtain the type of healthcare that we need. Also, many families are dealing with single parent homes, dealing with dysfunction in the homes, and churches hopefully can come in and help in those situations, but it's not always successful. And then also there are times when people don't really lean on churches for that help. Then also we are more likely to be experiencing and to be viewing and to be experiencing personally violence and crime. And violent crime is higher, and there's statistically more crime and more drastic crime that happens in our communities. Then there are also religious and cultural expectations. This is hard to understand sometimes, but I understood as a young child that there were expectations that I had because I went to church as a child. When I got to Southwest Texas State, I ran as hard as I could away from all of those expectations because I felt like I was never going to live up to what was told me that I needed to deal with. And then also in the culture, there were certain things that they told me that I needed to do in order to be successful. And so their level of success and their requirement of success caused me to go forth and try to do things that were actually unrighteous and unholy. And I injured people, and I became injured in the process. Also, there are healthcare disparities, and so we have to know how to deal with the culture. We have to know how to deal with the disparities where certain people sometimes don't receive the level of care that they need. And also, there's a book here called Madness by Antonia Hilton that I have on my desk. It talks about the fact that in certain time frames that the type of care we received was absolutely atrocious. And many times we were experimented on. If you look at the Tuskegee experiment, there were certain things. I worked in HIV and STD prevention and talked about syphilis and the ways that it deals with your body and your mind. And there are certain things that when those men were injected with syphilis, they were wrongly dealt with, and many of them went insane. And then sometimes we have identity struggles. I will tell you that I struggled today to determine what I was going to wear. And I didn't think that that was going to be an issue today because I really feel comfortable in my skin. But I had a whole nother outfit I was going to wear, but I had to actually concern myself about making a first impression. So code switching is a part of what we sometimes have to do in order to feel like we fit into society. And so those types of things sometimes keep us from desiring to be in society. Therefore, we shift our entire culture into another a thing because we don't feel that we fit in society. Therefore, we make our own culture and we make our own society. Another thing that we've dealt with is something I think that many people do understand, but maybe sometimes don't pay attention to, that we still deal with it today. There's racism and microaggressions. A microaggression is an incident where it may not be overtly racist, and it may even not be overtly personal in nature, but it does have an effect on someone. I had an incident just this past week where a young man in this church tossed a banana at one of our other congregants, and he said, "Happy Black History Month." And he thought it was funny because he likes dark humor, but the individual that received it was not exactly impressed. And so those types of things happen, and it happens in many different ways, and we have to be very careful of that. And then as a coping mechanism, sometimes we deal with substance abuse at a higher rate. And so we understand that these are some of the issues that we struggle with, but people use different mechanisms to try to cope with what they're struggling with. But in order to respond to that, what churches are doing is we are working to rebuild solutions to those issues, and we do it in the way that we know best. Here's what we do. We don't really call it peer support, but we do have peer connections, and we work with one another, and we provide common lived experiences with one another. And that is how we overcome many times, is because we are not afraid to ask, how is your family? What's going on with you? I haven't seen you in a while. How can I help? Those are the types of things that are common in churches. What we also are working to do as we preach and teach and share with one another is demystify the unknown. It's important that we take time to provide tangible examples to people and provide them information so that they can be able to say, you know what, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Maybe I do need therapy. Maybe I do need to sit down and talk with somebody. Maybe I do need to unpack all this baggage that I've been carrying. And what we as churches have to do is not only educate, but then also help them navigate the systems. Because many times people are afraid of the systems because either they've been dealt with wrongly or they just don't know what's available. I find too often that people are sitting right next to the resource that they need and they have no idea that it was right there. The next thing we do is we have become adept at connecting with people during crisis. Now, we have gotten to the place where we deal with suicide prevention and crisis management in different ways because we've been trained. However, throughout our church history, we have been those who have been right there when people have been struggling, and we've helped them through their crises. And then after the crises, many times we've been there daily or weekly or at different intervals to make sure that those individuals, are doing well. So churches have the unique ability to meet people where they are. And that's the important thing. We must learn to do that at an even better rate. So how do we find a measure of success? What I believe and what I'm seeing is that I am seeing so many churches right now that are becoming more adept at learning what is necessary to understand that there are principles that are found in the Bible. They're found in the Word of God, and we're bridging the gap and finding the parallels in what we find in our mental health institutions. And we are finding that in the mental health world, there are many examples of what happened in the Word of God. 1 Kings 19, verse 4, Elijah was so depressed, he prayed to God that he would die. He was so depressed that he prayed to God that he would no longer be living. Psalm 42:11, why so downcast, O my soul? Put your faith in God. There's a place where we can go through so much anxiety. And even in the Word of God, it says that we can go through being downcast and having so much anxiety that we lose sight of where our help comes from. Then also in 3 John chapter 1, verse 2, it says, I pray that you may prosper in all things, even in health, be in good health, even as your soul prospers. Again, when we talk about the soul in the Bible, we're talking about the mental faculties, your capacity to relate with other people and relate with yourself. And so what John is saying literally is he says, I want you to prosper and I want you to be in good health, even as your soul prospers. And so we know now that if our soul is not prospering, sometimes our bodies are affected. And so he's saying, I'm not leaving anything out. And because this is in the Word of God, I believe that God desires that you too would be in good health and that your soul would prosper. So what we're doing in this ministry is we're working to tear down barriers that would cause us to think that that mental health is incompatible with our faith. And that we understand that mental health support is a necessary part of our faith because it's a part of our whole healing. We are creating an empathetic and knowledgeable community where trauma can truly become healed. So in response to everything that we've now seen, we understand that people need help putting the pieces together. They struggle to understand how to navigate. So we've come up with a nonprofit called Piece by Piece. That is PEACE by PIECE, because we want people to receive the peace of God and that their soul would prosper. What we do is we help those who are disenfranchised and those who are in incarceration and post-incarceration. We help people that are in poverty, and we help just general individuals who are in the community. So you don't have to have any specific moniker or title, but we help anyone who comes. But what we found, being an African-American majority church, even though we are very multicultural, we found that many of our BIPOC community members are very much in need and don't know how to get the resources that they need to get this fixed. So our mantra is that we help those with burnt out hopes and dreams and unhealthy lifestyles, that they may get mentoring, mental health services, and then also get life skills training and help them with their purpose. Because we find that a lot of times, because people don't know why they exist, then they struggle with what am I to do with this, with the days that I'm given. I tell people all the time that for a long time, I was just on this earth breathing to death. I was just here taking air and not with no purpose. But our goal is inclusiveness, racial harmony, economic advancement, leadership skills, and personal development. And we find that mental health is a big part of all of that. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but we know that we can't do this on our own and that we need other organizations to help us to do what we must do. So these are some of the organizations that we work with: the Food Bank, the Healthy Haze Coalition, the City of San Marcos. I'm going to talk about faith and community wellness centers in San Antonio. They do an amazing job of training our teams, and they have been a major part in why we are able to be successful. Also, MHDD, who I just had an email from Anthony Wynn this morning, and we're going to follow up with him. Also, Via Hope, Southside Community Center, American Red Cross, and even other organizations like Community Action. So we've got a lot of people that we connect with. But I want you to know that everything that we're doing today was actually written in our vision for this ministry over 30 years ago. So this isn't anything new. We've actually been doing this type of service for quite a number of years. And what we now know, during the pandemic, that's when I took over as pastor, we started to see more and more people going through mental health challenges. And therefore, as a result, we started to say, okay, we need to take the time to actually start to be able to address these issues. And so we've done a number of things to deal with the whole person, even over to sex trafficking. We've been working in the community to help. So I'm going to start with a case study real quick. And I think you may know this person. His name is Darius Todd. That's me when I was at Texas or Southwest Texas State University. Um, I was 22 years old when this picture was taken, and that was actually about a month after I had tried to commit suicide for the second time. I suffered from severe depression and did not know what it was. I just knew that every day after I left work and finished with my classes, I would go home and literally sit in my bedroom in the dark. And sometimes that was not sufficient. And so I would go sit in my closet in the dark and I would think about what do I need to do to get rid of my life? Because I felt like that there was nothing that I could do. And so I took to self-harm. And then I also drank and smoked weed and did some other things that I felt were necessary in order to make myself feel better. And I felt it was okay because my friends were doing it. I saw adults before me do it, but I got no relief from it. Therefore, I had mental health crises, and I thank God for Earl Mosley, who used to be an employee of Southwest Texas State. He was one of my best friends, my best man in my wedding eventually, and he came to my rescue in many cases, and he helped me to deal with those crises. And I received healing over the years through affirmation in Christ because there were things that I was dealing with perfectionism and things that the Word of God taught me to deal with that so that I no longer felt like I had to be perfect, but that I was free in Christ. But also, I sought after a number of years, I sought treatment. And so even today, I go to treatment, I go to therapy when I need it because I know that it's important. Next, I'll talk about some people, and these people are not, I've made these people anonymous. So these are not the real pictures and not the real names. But know that first person I'll talk about is a young lady that we've been helping for about the past 2.5 years. She's a 22-year-old Hispanic female. She was in the foster care system where she went through a great deal of sexual abuse. And then she ran away and began to get into the sex trafficking environment. And then she had a history of incarceration, which somehow brought her to this city of San Marcos. We had a number of issues where she had dealt with suicidal ideations and other types of issues. And I'm not going to give you a lot of details, but I will share with you that we had one incident where she called me and told me, "Thank you for everything you've tried to do, but I am done with life. I've been cutting all week and I'm still feeling numb. Therefore, I'm going to stab myself in the stomach until I bleed out. And don't try to find me because I'm not where you think I am." What she didn't know is I heard things in the background and I knew exactly where she was. I tried to get some of our workers to go and help her, but no one was available. So I had the privilege and the responsibility to go and see about her. I had her to come out of her apartment, and I went in there and I looked for all of the sharp objects. And what I did is I pulled out these 3 long knives, as well as some other things that she had placed in her room where she was planning to follow through with what she was dealing with. I think about that day and I still shake because I realize that had we not had the ministry of people knowing that you can get help, she would have not been on our success story list. She instead would have been on a police blotter and no one would have ever realized who she was. But I thank God for the opportunity that we've had to get training and then get her into therapy and also to walk with her through her behavioral and life skills training. And she's still here today and she's prospering. And so I'm thankful for that. Next person is Suzanne, a 64-year-old African-American female. She came to our ministry some time ago, but then she walked away and then she came back and she said, "I'm going to give this one more try. And if it doesn't work, I'm done with all religion." Thankfully, she has received a lot of help, but somewhere along the line, she decided once again, this was her 4th or 5th suicide attempt. And she went through crisis management. She was able to get into a facility. We got her into a facility in Georgetown. And after she came out of that facility, she was supposed to come and get local assistance. Well, what we didn't know is that when we were taking her to her appointments, she was not being seen. We didn't know that. And so after about 2 weeks, she called one of our care workers and said, "Thank you guys for everything you tried to do, but I'm done with this life." That individual contacted me. I brought her in immediately, and we found out that she was not receiving the care that she needed. Thankfully, we had a licensed professional counselor that we could call, and we got her the assistance that she needed. One of the things that we found out in the follow-up and during her therapy is that she was struggling with her life's purpose. She loves to cook. Remember, I talked about soul food. What we did is we said, you know what, you love to cook. We've got a lot of hungry college students. Can you cook 20 to 30 plates every week on Wednesday? And what we're going to do is we're going to feed those college students. And she jumped into action. And I tell you what, she began to come and she began to hand out the plates because she loved to see the smiles and loved to see the people who were even sometimes having a difficulty in receiving. And she was able to pull them aside and say, hey, I know what you're feeling. And I want to make you a part of my community right now, that it's okay for you to receive because you don't know my story and what I've been through. Suzanne was amazing. So what do we do in this ministry? What we have is a three-tiered structure. And I didn't mean to do this. This wasn't my plan. It wasn't something that I thought up myself. It's just something that we began to develop. The first thing we have is a group of paraprofessionals, and these folks that are just regular lay people that are in our ministry. We've begun to train them. The next thing that we've done is we've added a professional counseling layer, where we now have 5. Very soon we'll have 6 LPCs that we can refer people to when we've made the assessment that, hey, this individual really needs to talk to somebody. Okay. The third tier, which we're developing right now, is we're building a psychiatric service referral process where we already take people to those psychiatric meetings, and we do help them to navigate those environments. But what I really need is to be able to refer people and make sure that they're getting the care that we desire. So let's talk about the paraprofessional support. We have trained lay people that have become trauma aware. Okay. And what that means is that we send them to training, and it is a ministry focus. It is not something that we just say, okay, well, if this happens, maybe it'll happen. No, we have a ministry focus that the people that have expressed the desire to learn, we send them to the training. I'll talk about that more here in a second. We do this because we understand that it's a community mandate. The community needs our assistance, and there are not enough healthcare providers providing mental health services. And so what we do is we do crisis assessments, and we also do navigation services. So we help people to navigate, hey, you can go to this organization, or you can go to this group, or you can get the care that you need in these different areas. We also provide peer support counseling, and we also escalate to those other 2 different areas. Another thing we do is we ask folks that if they will to take the tests. We don't want to put people in place that are not trained and don't have a level of proficiency in doing what we're doing. We're not licensed to do care, but we do know that we are sometimes, or many times, most times, first responders. Okay. And so we're responsible for going there, doing that mental health first aid, and determining what the need is. Another thing we do is we do have times when we inform our congregation of the different services and the different reasons for needing those services. And we are beginning to pull in members of our community. Some of the folks that we're working with locally are different organizations, and they bring us people. Then they say, hey, can you share with this person why it's important that they need this assistance? And we're going to do a more concerted effort with the community as well. I mentioned to you that we have in that first tier training. To give you an example, the Faith and Community Wellness group in San Antonio, they have been amazing. I've got their website and Pastor Veron Blue. She has done an amazing job of helping us to get the training that we need. But we've also done our own mental health first aid. We've sought that out. MHDD has provided that in some cases, both for adults and for adolescents. We've dealt with intergenerational trauma, resilience and self-care, sexual trauma and violence, ACEs, trauma-informed care in general, and mental health for African-American youth. And the list is tremendous. We've probably had 40 to 50 classes that we've dealt with Faith and Community and other groups. We've also requested that individuals get certifications. So you'll see mental health first aid, suicide prevention, family coaching, sanctuary coaching, peer support specialists is something that we've begun to get into with Via Hope out of Austin, as well as community health worker certifications that we're working with another group that we just recently became affiliated with. And we actually have others that are in our congregation that are in college settings, getting degrees and seeking for certifications in that way. Our layer 2, our professional services, professional counseling, our coordinator is Jonnie Wilson, of whom you're going to hear in just a moment. And as I stated, she has helped us to gather a group of individuals who will do individual therapy for adults and adolescents. In the future, we're going to also include families so that we can really broaden the breadth of what we can offer. In addition to that, we're this summer kicking off what we call Real Talk groups. And this is groups for teens, small group therapy for teens and young adults. We find that our college students especially struggle with different types of issues that we need to address, but sometimes individual therapy is not the only thing that they need or not what they will accept. And so small group therapy is something that I'm hoping that we can be successful with. We've already seen the need. Now we're going to address that need. Psychiatric services, we've talked about that. We currently assist folks going to the different hospitals and the different inpatient and outpatient care areas, but we want to have a more robust infrastructure. So we're discussing with different organizations that we can build MOUs, memorandums of understanding, and also business agreements that we can provide more direct care and refer people directly. So mental health awareness and counseling is a big part of who we are. By bringing those licensed professional counselors and other mental health care individuals, we help people that are dealing with self-harm, suicide prevention, substance abuse, prevention, and prevention is where we really want to focus, because ultimately, even as I've shared with Chief Standridge, who's our police chief here locally, and also the county sheriff, and also those who work in hospitals. I've spoken to the individual who leads some of the hospitals here. We kind of integrate with a lot of folks to make sure that we have connections with folks, and forgive me for missing those names. But ultimately, we want to sow seeds of hope so that we can reap a harvest of healing in our community. And with that, I'm going to skip the questions because we're going to do that here in a little bit. But I want to leave you with our connection information. If you ever want to find out more information from us, and I'm sure these slides and information can be provided to you at a different time, but I make myself available because I don't want to ever be a gatekeeper, someone that would keep what our success has been a secret. And so if you ever want to communicate with me or ask me questions, I'm open to do so. With that, I'll pass it over.
As Pastor Todd mentioned, we are going to now be hearing from Ms. Jonnie Wilson, who is a very close friend of ours here at Translational Health Research Center. Ms. Jonnie Wilson is a licensed professional counselor, who focuses specifically on helping the folks within Central Texas. She is here to present a case study that can bring, again, more information to the topics that we're talking about today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Wilson.
Well, thank you, Cody. First of all, I'm honored to be here. And I guess Pastor Todd, we think alike. I will say that. And some of the things that he's mentioned, I'm not going to mention. But the thing that I gleaned from Pastor Todd, he's a holistic type person. And I would say that even though I'm a counselor, I am also a person that believes in holistic healing for my clients. And this started when I was working at Texas State before I even became a counselor. I was doing this type of work where I was seeing students. I worked in student diversity and inclusion, but I worked at Texas State for 25 years before I retired. And the next step was, while I was there, I was seeing so many students, and they were all marginalized students, and they were always talking to me about their issues. And I would tell them that you need to go to counseling. And they would tell me, but I don't know if I trust those people over there. They don't look like me. But for me, it was a labor of love, of working full time and deciding to go back to school to get this last degree. But I'm so glad I did, because the population that I want to work with is what I am working with, you know. So I do work with 80% of my population are marginalized people. They're anywhere from Native American or American Indians to Asians to Latinx, Black, excuse me, LGBT community, also veterans as well. And so I'm seeing those in my population. They start from age 15 to 80. And most of my clients are clients that have never been to counseling. And so I am also teaching foundational information because a lot of them, they're afraid. They don't know what to expect. I hear that a lot from my clients. I don't know what to expect. What is this all about? But just foundational stuff first before I can even get to anything else. And sometimes within that, they're having other needs. And because I lived in San Marcos for over 30 years, I raised my three daughters there. I am privy to a lot of the information, where to go. I wouldn't say I know everything, but I do know quite a bit. And my office is downtown. It's on the square. And so I have a lot of college students that actually come to see me because they can just walk to me because I'm right downtown. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about the different themes of what I am seeing in counseling. And these are people who either live in San Marcos or they're attending college there in San Marcos at Texas State. One of the things that's very, very interesting, I have a young man who is a Black male who is 18 years old, and so he has a lot of issues because of COVID. You would think, oh, COVID is over, but not for this young man, because in the time when he was having, when COVID was around, he had several traumas that happened to him. And so all of a sudden, things were different. It's like you woke up and then you can't go anywhere. And so he is struggling with still isolating himself. He has some trauma, like two of his grandparents died during COVID, and he was very close to them. Those things really had an effect on him. So he's also dealing with social isolation. He had sleep paralysis. Thankfully, that is gone now, because I have been working with him with this, and he's getting a lot better. He graduates this year, and he is supposed to attend Texas State University. I wouldn't say that would happen a few years ago, but now he is ready for that. We're still working on him staying on campus, though. He doesn't want to stay on campus, but I think it would be good for him. Another college student who is Asian American, I am working with him with the model minority, where he is Asian, so he is expected to do you know above and beyond everybody else. And so he was struggling with this because college is different from high school, and so he's having a lot of issues with that. And on top of that, he's gay. And so he's not fitting the mold as far as from his community. And so we are working with him with his identity of knowing who he is apart from his what his mother or his father, those expectations in his community. Another one, young lady who I met her when she was getting ready to graduate with her bachelor's degree. She's now working on her master's. She'll graduate in May. But because of generational trauma, she saw her great grandmother who wasn't successful with marriage. Her grandmother wasn't successful with marriage. Her mother was not successful with marriage. And so she was saying that, well, I'm not going to be able to have, I'm married. I'm not going to have children because of this. And so we have done a lot of work with her, that she could be the one that changes the generational trauma that's went on in her family, that it does not have to be the same way. She was also struggling with her being the myth, I say the myth of the strong Black woman, because in her family, even though she was the oldest, she was like the mother for her mother, because her mother was dealing with mental health issues. And then she has a younger brother, but she was the one that goes to the rescue all the time. And she had to be an adult very young. So we talk about adultification, what that means to young Black girls that start taking on adult roles, sometimes as young as 9 and 10. Well, she was one of them. So she had a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety because of the generational trauma, and just trauma in general that was going on in her family. But I'm happy to say that next month she gets married. And so that was not on her horizon at all. And for somebody to be able to live their life, more abundantly than what she was, kind of closing herself off to opportunities. So I've worked with her for the last 3 years, and unfortunately, her husband is going to be in the military, so she's going to be leaving me. But I'm so happy that I was able to help her. The last population that I really want to talk about is the 59 to 80-year olds. So, yes, I have clients 59 to 80-year-old who are going through this thing where they've been married for years and years and years, right? And they are going through this transition because they are empty nesters, or they don't know their identity apart from being a mom, or taking care of household, all of those things, and not knowing what they want. So we're doing a lot of identity work and understanding that they could have a life outside of family. And it's been very intriguing for me because I've gone through it myself because I'm an empty nester, but it's been very interesting and very, very rewarding. What it's about to me is instilling hope in all of my clients that even though they were dealt with maybe generational trauma or just sexual abuse, that there is hope. And because of all the things that especially with marginalized populations have to go through, it's really exciting to let them know that even though you have been dealt all of these things, that you can be the ultimate of whoever you want to be. So some of the things, let me just do this very briefly. Some of the things, like I said, was COVID. I deal with a lot of isolation. Childhood trauma is a big one. There's a lot of abuse that goes on in especially African American families. And so I am dealing with women who are going through abuse. And, I was fortunate enough to work for the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center as a domestic violence counselor. So that has helped me quite a bit to be able to help these young ladies of understanding that they don't have to take that abuse. A lot of times, what I've seen with the research I've done with Black women, a lot of times because they want to be it for everyone, and they want to lift up their family, that they won't report abuse. And there's a whole presentation I do on the myth of the strong Black woman, where Black women are taking on all types of I would say just rescuing everyone. That's a good way of putting it. And so getting them to understand that, that you don't have to be in the sideline, you don't have to be, undercover with all the things that are going on with them, that they can be vocal and they can definitely, most definitely, have a life outside of abuse. The other thing is that I've had a lot of, when I said childhood trauma, I had one client in particular that a mother passed away, or excuse me, was murdered. And the people I'm talking about is right here in San Marcos, okay, was murdered, and at a young age. She was 16 when I started seeing her. She attempted suicide several times, but I was able to help her um, to get back on the right track. And now she's in college. And that is a big thing because she had no hope. She didn't ever think that she was going to college. And 3 years later, she is in college and doing very well. And her first semester, she had a 3.6. And I still see her every week because I'm like an anchor for her as well. So, as I was saying before, I do believe in having holistic approach to my clients. There's a lot of suicide that is going on right there in San Marcos. A lot of people are dealing with life's transitions as well, especially when a person is graduating from college. So what is next, and all the anxiety that goes along with that. So anyway, I think that's all I'm going to say because I want to get to the questions, but that's just a little bit of what is going on right here in San Marcos.